Portugal's proposed law to extend citizenship from 5 years of residency to 10 years is still making its way through Parliament, but a lot of people are already looking at alternatives. I've spent the last few months going systematically through every EU country with a citizenship timeline of under 7 years, reading the actual nationality laws, cross-referencing official government guidance, and talking with people who've navigated these processes for themselves. And what I found is that there are legitimate alternatives to Portugal, but which one's right for you depends entirely on your profile, your risk tolerance, and the kind of friction that you're willing to accept. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the countries that actually hold up under scrutiny, which ones are genuinely fast, which ones look fast but are not, and critically, the ones that only work if you fit a very specific profile. And one important note before we start. Every country I'm covering here allows dual citizenship, which is a non-negotiable factor for most UK and US citizens, and it's why countries like the Netherlands, despite having a 5-year timeline, are not included on this list. So let's get started with the simplest case. Now, if you're a UK citizen, Ireland is unique in Europe for you. And this is important to understand clearly. You don't need a visa, you don't need a residence permit, and you don't need to qualify under any immigration scheme at all. Because of the Common Travel Area, which is the agreement that predates the EU, UK nationals can move to Ireland freely, live there indefinitely, work anywhere they want, be self-employed, or quite frankly, just do nothing at all. And from a citizenship perspective, the meaning is simple. If you actually live in Ireland for 5 years, you can apply for Irish citizenship and rejoin the EU. And to be completely clear here, because this sometimes trips people up, UK citizens in Ireland are not on stamp zero, they're not on a student visa, and they're not on some special permission that may or may not count towards citizenship. So if you're a UK citizen and your goal is to regain your EU rights with the absolute minimum administrative friction, then Ireland is probably impossible to beat. But if you're a US citizen or any other non-EU and non-UK national, then Ireland can still work for you. It has the same timeline to citizenship. But when it comes to getting residency, it's a whole different game. You do need a proper residency route, and not all of them count towards citizenship. So Ireland has something called Stamp Zero, which is often marketed as a retirement visa or a passive income visa. And it's fine for living in Ireland, but it's not a reliable pathway to citizenship. Because time spent in Ireland on Stamp Zero usually doesn't count as this key concept of reckonable residence for naturalisation purposes unless you later transition to a different and qualifying status. And potentially by the time you figure that out, you could have wasted years. So what is the best route for US citizens in Ireland? Well, the most relevant long-term residency route is Ireland's Startup Entrepreneur Programme, which is usually called STEP. And this is a genuine entrepreneurship pathway where you set up an innovative, internationally focused business in Ireland. And you meet the funding requirements, and then they grant you residency for an initial 2 years, but that can be renewed up to 5. And if you stay resident, operate the business well, and meet Ireland's standard citizenship criteria, then all of that time counts towards naturalisation. So in short, Ireland works brilliantly if you're a British national, and it can also work for Americans, for other non-EU and non-UK citizens, but you have to choose a route that's actually designed for long-term residency, not just lifestyle convenience. And this is a theme that you're going to see over and over again throughout this video. What works on paper isn't always what works in practice. Next up, let's look at France, which is probably one of the most misunderstood options on this list, mainly because most people have no idea how fast it can actually be. Now, if you dig into French nationality law, you find something that may surprise you. France can actually grant citizenship in as little as 2 years. And that's not a loophole, but it's something explicitly written into the law. But here's where expectations and reality diverge. So under French law, the standard requirement for citizenship by naturalisation is 5 years of legal residence. But that requirement can be reduced to 2 years in specific cases, particularly for those people who've completed at least 2 years of higher education in France and they've obtained a French diploma, like a master's degree. This is set out in the French Civil Code, and it is also reflected in official government guidance. So this 2-year pathway is real. But here's where most people get surprised. They hear 2 years and they think, oh, I'll just do a master's degree in France and then I'm sorted. But that's not really how it works in practice. So, naturalization in France is discretionary. Meeting those minimum residency years makes you eligible to apply, but it doesn't guarantee approval. According to official guidance and practitioner accounts, they consistently emphasize that the French authorities will also want to see proof of a French language ability up to B2 level, which is quite high, financial and professional stability, and overall integration into French society. So, if you're there as a student, yes, student residency does count as legal residence. There's nothing that excludes it from the 2 year reduction. But in practice, student status is treated as temporary. And what authorities actually care about is what comes after that, particularly your work situation, your income, and your language level. So that's why France is often described in practice as a 3 to 4 year route, even though the legal minimum is 2 years of residency under that special case. And this extra time is not a formal rule, but it actually reflects that applicants are being cautious once they understand how discretionary the process actually is. And one important nuance that most people miss is that you don't actually have to enter France on a student visa to benefit from the education reduction. In theory, you could establish legal residency under a different category, for example, as an entrepreneur or under a professional residency permit, and then you could enroll in a master's program alongside that. So, just from a legal standpoint, what matters most is that you've completed at least 2 years of higher education in France and you meet the minimum residency period of 2 years when you apply. But naturalization is still discretionary, and the authorities will look at the overall coherence of your situation, including your residency, studies, work, language, and integration, not just whether you've technically ticked all the boxes. So, realistically speaking, France offers one of the shortest citizenship timelines in Europe on paper. But in reality, it rewards people who are willing to integrate properly in terms of language, job, and socially. So if you're already a good speaker of French, like B2 level or beyond, and you do plan to work in France, then this could be a genuinely fast timeline if you just add that master's program. But if you're looking for something automatic or low touch, then it's probably not going to be a good fit. And that's the pattern that we'll find consistently throughout this video. The countries that look fastest on paper often come with the most friction in practice. Next up, we're going to look at Germany, where the rules recently changed in a way that is actually much more advantageous than in the past. Germany wasn't a great option for citizenship until very recently, and that all changed in 2024 when the country voted to reduce its standard citizenship timeline from 8 years to 5 years, and it now fully allows dual citizenship when it didn't before. Together, these two changes turned Germany into one of the more straightforward and appealing long-term options in Europe. In Germany, the standard requirements are 5 years of legal residence, B1 level German, passing a basic civics test, and evidence that you're financially self-sufficient. However, there is an even faster track. If you can achieve or already have C1 level German, the timeline can be reduced to 3 years. So if you're a founder or a freelancer, Germany already has several established routes for self-employment and freelance work. But these are not passive income or digital nomad visas. Instead, they're designed for people who are actively working. And Germany distinguishes between recognized freelance professions and self-employed entrepreneurs who are running a business. And in both cases, the key question is whether your work is economically viable, whether it fits within Germany's regulatory framework, and whether it can support you without turning to public assistance. And from a citizenship perspective, these routes are not special or accelerated, but they're simply ways of establishing lawful residence. And if you remain resident, pay taxes, meet the language and integration requirements, and stay in Germany for 5 years or 3 years if you have C1 German, then you're going to be on the same footing as anyone else. Germany isn't necessarily fast in the way that France or Cyprus can be fast, unless you're practically fluent in German, but it is procedural, it's transparent, and it's consistent, which really matters a lot over a 5-year horizon. So if you're comfortable learning the language, working within a structured system, and playing a long but stable game, then Germany is one of the most reliable paths to EU citizenship, and it's also one of the strongest passports in the world. Next up, let's look at Belgium, which takes that same serious attitude about self-employment and applies it in a very different way. Now, Belgium is interesting because it takes self-employment very seriously as a route to long-term residence and eventually Belgian citizenship. Unlike countries that mainly integrate people through employment contracts, Belgium actually has a formal system in place for people who want to run a business or work independently. For non-EU nationals, Belgium has this system called the professional card. And it's not a digital nomad or passive income visa, but it's an explicit authorization to conduct self-employed activity in Belgium. Belgian authorities focus on the project itself, whether what you're doing makes economic sense and can support you without public assistance. And when assessing a professional card application, the authorities look at whether the activity is economically viable, whether it contributes something new or useful to society, and whether it fits within the regional economic context. And this all applies whether you're starting a new business or joining an existing one. In terms of citizenship, Belgium does allow dual citizenship, and the standard timeline is that you can apply after 5 years of legal residency. So Belgium requires an A2 level knowledge of one of Belgium's official languages, so you can choose from French, Dutch, or German. Economic participation during the qualifying period, those whole 5 years, such as working or running a business in this case. It doesn't have a national civics exam, but even with A2 as the minimum language threshold, if you have a higher language level, then you can submit a stronger application. Belgium works well for people who want to operate as founders, consultants, or independent professionals who are comfortable being assessed on the substance of what they're doing and who don't want their residency status tied to a single employer. But it's less of a good fit if you're looking for something that's passive or low touch. The process can be quite administratively dense, and it's not especially quick, but it is relatively transparent. If your business activity makes sense and you meet the criteria, then outcomes are generally predictable. Next up, we're going to look at a country where the timeline is shorter, but the framework is much newer and a lot more specific. So Cyprus recently introduced a fast-track naturalisation route, and this can be as short as 3 or 4 years. But the big catch is that this is not a general pathway. It is designed for a very specific applicant profile. So what is this fast track? Well, Cyprus has got a standard citizenship route and a fast track route. And this fast track is explicitly tied to people who are employed by companies that fall under Cyprus's strategy for attracting international business activity, which is essentially highly skilled employees like directors, key personnel, and specialists. If you qualify for that fast track route, then you need 12 months of legal continuous residency immediately before you apply, and a total of 4 years of legal residency in the relevant period, or 3 years if you have a higher level of Greek. And Cyprus links the timeline directly to your level of Greek language. So if you have A2 Greek, or you can achieve it, then you can access the 4-year track. But B1 level Greek gives you access to the 3-year track. And there's also a knowledge requirement. You must demonstrate an understanding of Cyprus's socio-political reality through an exam process. The fast track typically calls for a university degree or some equivalent professional experience, a minimum salary threshold as well. The processing time is relatively quick. The procedure is supposed to be examined within 8 months. But if you're a founder, this is where things get a little unclear. So in all the resources, legal resources are constantly describing the fast track as an employee-based pathway tied to qualifying companies. Now, if you're a founder or an entrepreneurial type, you're going to be asking the question, can I set up my own company and employ myself? That's not something I can give you a clear answer on, because in Cyprus, the rule is framed around employment in an eligible company, and whether a founder paying themselves qualifies or not depends on how Cyprus treats the company structure, the role, and the employment relationship. I think there could be potential there, but it's one where you would really want proper legal guidance before building your plan around it. So how to think about Cyprus realistically? Well, if you're employed by a qualifying company, you are willing to learn some Greek, at least to A2 level, and you can meet the salary threshold, then Cyprus is definitely worth considering. If you're self-employed or running your own business, the pathway is a lot less certain, but it's definitely open to exploration. Next up, we're looking at a country that's also a 5-year timeline, and it goes by the book, but it's still a higher friction choice than some of the others. Luxembourg is one of the clearest systems on this list. And if you've been following Portugal's increasingly unpredictable interpretation of its own rules, that clarity matters. So in Luxembourg, they allow naturalisation after 5 years of legal residency, provided that the final year is uninterrupted. And that's a pretty firm rule. It doesn't have any broad fast-track exceptions, and there's no differing interpretations between municipalities, and not really any surprises. So the biggest barrier for most people here is going to be language requirements. A2 level spoken Luxembourgish and B1 level listening comprehension. And this requirement is specific to Luxembourgish, and it's not possible to pass it with French or German. and it's non-negotiable for naturalisation. Applicants must also complete a civic integration requirement, either through an approved Living in Luxembourg Together course or passing an integration test. Most people qualify for residency through employment, highly skilled professional roles, or approved self-employment or business activity. Luxembourg also has something they call residency for private reasons, where you can become a resident through proof of income from a source outside of Luxembourg. So it could be your pension, investment income, dividends, or similar. So this could be an interesting option to explore. All of the routes are structured, well-defined, and closely monitored. Once you hit that 5-year mark and you submit your application, I've been told by many people that processing is relatively quick. We're talking months, not years. And this is a massive contrast to Portugal, where applicants are often waiting over 2 years after becoming eligible. So Luxembourg is a good fit for you if you're comfortable learning a new language with limited use outside the country, if you expect to be professionally anchored there for at least 5 years, and if you value this procedural certainty over flexibility. But it's usually not a good fit if you're looking for lifestyle-led residency or minimal integration requirements. I put Luxembourg on this list not because it's so easy or so quick, but because it's predictable. If you meet the requirements, the timeline is very clear, and the rules are applied pretty consistently with low ambiguity. If you're exhausted by Portugal's shifting interpretations and unpredictable processing times, then having a bit of reliability can be worth the trade-off. Every country in this video has a legal pathway that makes you eligible to apply for citizenship after 5 years of residency or less. And that's not always the case across most of the EU, where minimum residency periods can be 7 years, 10 years, or even longer. And if there's one takeaway from this video, it's that there's no single fastest route to EU citizenship, but instead a set of trade-offs. Some countries are fast because they're simple, like Ireland for UK citizens. And some are fast because they reward deep integration, like France with its master's degree. And some are slower but clear and predictable, like Germany and Belgium. So instead of asking yourself which country is the fastest, the better question is, what kind of friction am I willing to accept in my quest for second citizenship? Is it time? Is it language? Is it administrative complexity? Or is it capital? Every country on this list optimizes for a different answer to that question. And it doesn't work to assume that a headline timeline equals an outcome, because citizenship is never automatic when you're naturalizing. It's always a function of residency, integration, and how the system is designed to decide who belongs. If Portugal does move to a 10-year timeline, it won't be the end of viable options in Europe. There are plenty more to choose from, but it will reward people who think strategically rather than emotionally. And in future videos, I'm going to break down these specific paths in more detail to help you decide which trade-offs actually make sense for your situation. And if you want to stay ahead of EU residency and citizenship changes as they actually happen, I'm sharing ongoing analysis in the Digital Emigre newsletter. You can find the link in the description. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.